One of those political whodunits that wasn't hard to solve. Well, because it was the Prime Minister in number 10 at night with a very, very long knife, or two. It's 50 years ago today, Friday the 13th, unlucky for some, since that mild-mannered old Etonian, Harold Macmillan, carried out the most brutal reshuffle in British political history. Well, we'll discuss that and whether David Cameron might have a few lessons to learn from it in a moment. But first, here's a familiar face who had a ringside seat on the night of the long knives.
Down, doobie-doo, down, down. Comma, down.
50 years ago, Prime Minister Harold Macmillan carried out one of the most dramatic and bloody reshuffles in political history. He sacked 7 of his cabinet. The most prominent casualty was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Selwyn Lloyd. And I was working as a young intern for Selwyn Lloyd, so I had a ringside seat at the spectacle of the Night of the Long Knives.
Breaking up is hard to do.
Well, the day started with me bringing in the newspapers to Selwyn Lloyd in his flat. It was about 7:45 in the morning, and suddenly our eyes fell on a headline in the Daily Mail which said, in effect, chancellors are going to be sacked. And Selwyn dismissed this completely, saying this is just journalist tosh. And then there was a big surprise in mid-morning when suddenly there appeared in the Chancellor's office the private secretary to the Prime Minister, who was called Sir Timothy Bly. He astonished me by saying, look, I'm afraid my master has got some bad news for your master. The Prime Minister has decided to ask the Chancellor to resign. I wonder if you would mind breaking this bad news to Selwyn Lloyd. I said, bloody well, tell him yourself, because I thought that he had no business passing messages from the Chancellor and the Prime Minister through a 19-year-old student.
Here comes that lonely feeling again.
Macmillan himself called Selwyn Lloyd the loyalist and best colleague I have ever had. They had been close colleagues for a very long time. I spent the evening with a man who was shattered. A good few whiskies were poured out. Suddenly the doorbell rang, and the person at the door was the post office engineer who said, I've come to remove the high-security scrambler telephone. And I remember thinking, how quickly power fades. It was botched because it was done not in a carefully planned operation scheduled in Macmillan's mind for the autumn. It had to be brought forward in a great panic because of a leak. He did it very badly and hastily. I think the first lesson of the Night of the Long Knives is don't rush into reshuffles in a panic. It's not a bad idea to rejuvenate a government every so often. But if you're going to do it a great deal more skillfully and thoughtfully and strategically than the Night of the Long Knives.
Great stuff there. Joined now by Jonathan Aitken and Peter Riddle from the Institute for Government. Welcome to you both. Let's just remember what the context then. The Tories had been in power for 11 years by then. The government seemed to kind of belong to a different Britain than the country Britain was becoming. The government wasn't that popular. There were problems with inflation and strikes and so on. Harold Macmillan seemed to belong to the Edwardian age. This was an attempt, this was a dramatic attempt, was it not, to kind of drag the government into the 1960s?